my lovely library lions. Today we're going to do my September wrap-up where I talk about all the books that I read in September. I actually got to 6 this month, which is better than the previous month, and I thought it was going to be pretty bad because I spent so much of the month doing other things than reading. But I did do 6 books. I'm really proud of myself, so let's talk about that. The first book I read was Your Life Has Been Delayed by Michelle I. Mason. This was a book that I got from NetGalley in exchange for an honest review. I really loved the premise of this book, of a girl in the 90s getting on a plane, and when she gets off the plane, we are in sort of 2020, not COVID 2020 because the book was written and conceived before COVID was a thing, but just 2020 as it would have been without any of the pandemic stuff. And so, everything's changed. She was a girl who wanted to write for the newspaper. She comes out in a world where the newspaper doesn't really exist as it used to in the 90s, and all of her friends are older, her parents are older, her brother is married and has kids. Everything in her life has just fallen apart completely because she's been gone for 20 years, and 20 to 25 years, I don't remember the exact span, but she's been gone for a lifetime, essentially, longer than she was alive. And everything has fallen apart around her. I thought this could have been such a fun story looking at how different things are, making references to the 90s, which is a time I wasn't quite alive during. I was alive for half of it, but only technically alive. I was like a toddler, so I didn't really have complex thoughts. But I thought that was going to be a really fun thing to examine, and I was kind of sad that a lot of the book focused on romance, and it was a weird romance that made me kind of uncomfortable based on her relationship to the boy she's interested in and his parents and that sort of thing. It made me feel weird, and there was a lot of emphasis put on this relationship and growing it, and because of that we lost a lot of her growth as a character and the scenes of her getting used to this new century, this new world that she lives in now. I also thought it was weird that when they were talking about, we have to learn about the media that's popular in 2020 instead of in 1990. You have to learn about what people care about now, what media is popular. And the media they keep referencing is the Hunger Games. I think the Hunger Games was popular. I don't know that now in 2020 high school students are still talking about the Hunger Games like that's their big formative series. It's weird that there's no mention of like Game of Thrones or Harry Potter or any of the book series that are really doing well right now, because I don't know that teenagers are still really excited about the Hunger Games. Maybe they are, maybe I'm wrong, but it felt out of touch. And because so much of the focus was on that, instead of covering a broad swath of media from the 2010s and that sort of thing, they covered basically just the Hunger Games. That was a little weird. I ended up not liking the book as much as I thought I would. The premise, so fun, so amazing, but the execution just was lacking. The next book I read was Moxie by Jennifer Matthew. I adored Devoted, and I did like The Truth About Alice. I love her as an author, so I was really excited to get into this book, and I thought I would adore it. It was on my shelf for a while before I finally found the time to pick it up, and I liked it. I really liked the parts of the book where you get to see sort of the actual zine that she made, and you get to see all the cutout pasted art and what she's saying. I liked the focus on the different sorts of sexism and oppression, and how it's not only big evil sexism, and there can be little acts of sexism as well, but I feel like it didn't examine that in enough depth. I feel like this book focused a lot on the kind of sexism that's just obviously outright evil, and it made it seem like, yeah, it should be pretty clear when people are being horrible to women because they're out here wearing shirts that say women belong in the kitchen and yelling things like, go make me a sandwich, which people haven't done since 2010. But that was sort of the main villains of the series, were people who sexually assaulted women out in the open where other people could see them do it. People who wore shirts like that. Principals who told women to just get over their sexual assault and move on. And there was a little taste of the well-meaning boyfriend who sometimes doesn't understand the issues that women has and maybe brushes them off, and he has a good heart, he's a good person, but he just doesn't understand yet and he needs to be taught. And then they kind of glossed over that to just be but most of the villains are really obviously sexist, and it was just very heavy-handed. I think it's definitely a good book for younger female readers, but it deals with some very intense topics for younger readers, so it's complicated because I don't think it is written old enough that it covers the topics of sort of sexual assault or anything with enough grace to be read by older readers and feel that depth of that sort of thing. It's sort of like Babby's first feminist novel, and I think it's good for that. I think it introduces a lot of neat ideas about feminism. I like the coverage of the Riot Girls, and I wish we would have gotten more of that history in here, but it just really skews young for the topics it's covering, so I don't know that I really enjoyed this one either. In the middle of the month, I took my manga break and read the 14th volume of Fullmetal Alchemist. I love the focus on Greedling, or Grin, in this one, and it really actually made me appreciate him more as a character than the manga did. I always preferred OG Greed, and I still do like original Greed better than Greedling, but he gets some pretty good scenes in here, and I like his sort of speech about how greed and hope aren't that different, about how greed is necessary for humanity in a way that maybe some of the other sins aren't. So I did like that. I didn't like the focus on Al. I feel like without him being with Ed, it's a great time for their characters to grow, because for so much of the series before these past 2 volumes, they are attached at the hip. But Al is just not as interesting on his own, and his whole fainting problem wasn't something I was invested in. I also didn't really care for the scenes with Hohenheim. I think he obviously has a complex buildup. I like the narrative that he doesn't have to be forgiven, but he has his reasons for doing things, and he's not just some evil old man. But I don't really care for the scenes that include him. They don't interest me. So after the Greedling stuff, I sort of fell out of interest until we came back to Greedling and Ed, while we were covering sort of the side stories for Al and Hohenheim and what they were doing while Ed was busy with Greedling and the 2 Chimeras. It's like a solid 3 stars. Then I finished a book I've been reading for a long time because I was doing a buddy read with one of my good friends, and that's From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I was so excited to read this book, and I really enjoyed it because I was doing the buddy read, because it was so fun to talk to someone every day about what I thought about this book and what I thought about the chapters. And I like Hawk. He is definitely Rhysand flavored, but I like that flavor, so of course I liked him. He's a very common sort of protagonist in romance novels now, and I think that's fine. I think it works, people like it, that's good. So I enjoyed that part of the book. I didn't like Poppy, and it's hard to explain why I didn't. She's a tough girl in the sense that she can fight for herself, and I like female characters who can fight, but that's pretty much the only way that Poppy is a strong female character. I don't feel like she has agency in this story. I don't feel like she gets to make any important decisions for herself. She's just taken from one place to another. Men are making every decision for her, even if it's a man that probably cares about her like Hawk, who's deciding where she's going to go, who she's going to be with, what she's going to do. And she just kind of goes along with it for the most part. She might be upset, she might fight back, but in the end, she actually likes it. She actually likes being with whoever she's with at the time. And I found that the relationship between Hawk and Poppy was kind of uncomfortable. I really liked Hawk. I thought he was charming, and he was a little predatory, I will admit that, but it's a romance novel, it's all fun and games. But I didn't like that Poppy was so innocent. Like, she didn't feel like she had any real passion or power in the relationship. She just felt like she was a piece being used. So I didn't feel like that relationship ended up feeling very romantic. And the way that the book ends, which I won't spoil, feels like the relationship has been very rushed. I don't see why they're in love. It's just sort of a bunch of short stories about things they do, and there's no moment where I'm like, this is where they started to love each other. It's like they met, and the instant their eyes met, they were like, oh, wow, that person's really, really hot. I want to bang them. And then they banged, and they're like, well, that was pretty good, so why aren't we in love now? And I didn't feel it. I didn't feel the chemistry between them, and it's a shame because I really like the world building that's going on here. It's not terribly complex, but I like vampires, I like werewolves, I think it's interesting. I'm going to read the sequel, but I'm not a fan of the main pairing in this romance book, which is kind of the whole point of a romance, so 3 stars. I actually read 2 arcs this month, and the next one that I read was When Night Breaks by Janella Angeles. So this one was hard because I loved Where Dreams Descend. I loved the world it was building up. I loved the competition aspect where we saw all the magicians come together and battle against each other with their illusions. And then this book was just a mess. It was such a mess. There was such a rush to build so many complicated world pieces. It felt like nothing happened for the first 60% of the book. We have our two protagonists, Kalia and DeMarco, and neither of them are doing anything. It's just scene after scene of them sitting and talking to other characters, while the other characters just info dump everything like, actually, I'm your long-lost family, and this is where we're from, and this is how magic works, and this is where this person went, and this is what happened to this person. Or just, like, another family member coming in and being like, actually, we do this and this and this, and we keep everything secret, and we erase people's memories, and that's why we do this and this and this, and that's the whole first 60% of the book is just everything being explained to you by a different character who isn't the protagonist, while the protagonist does nothing. And then we have some interesting scenes, like there's a brief bit of intrigue where we find out what Jack's deal is. He was a big mystery figure in the first book. I thought he was so compelling. We figure out what Jack's deal is, and you think that's going to go somewhere. It doesn't. Kalia has sort of a love triangle with Jack and DeMarco, but there's honestly no development between her and DeMarco romantically, and there's nothing between Jack and her romantically because he's been sort of abusive. So you have one side of the love triangle that's like, this is not going to work because he doesn't respect her, and then you have one side where it's like, well, there's no chemistry here, there's no reason for them to like each other. They have so few scenes together in this book, other than the scene where they meet back up and they're like, oh, of course, I always loved you, and I've been looking for you forever, let's bang. And they do that, and then it's like, okay, well, they're in love, and they'd do anything for each other, and I'm not really invested in it because neither of them are interesting characters. Neither of them have had any growth. Meanwhile, Jack is over here having all of the growth, but getting almost none of the page time, and it seems like at the end of the book, we're told something about him, and we're like, oh no, that's very bad, and then the book ends, and it's like, actually, that wasn't true, or the rules are broken, we're not going to explain how they were broken, we just wanted to have this ending, so Jack, like, whatever we said about him before, just forget about that, that's not valid anymore. So it does all this world building up, and then the final scenes are just all the rules that we've just established in this 300 pages of world building just being broken because actually the protagonists decided that they didn't want things to end that way, even though that's how you were told they would have to end based on all the world building. And why? There's no real explanation. The end. And I get that it was a duology, so it had 2 books to build up the world and finish the world the way that usually you would do over 3 books in a trilogy. There was definitely some need to get through some things faster. But I wonder if all the plot points were really necessary. I wonder if all these things that they kept adding in, these new things that they wanted to establish and build all in the course of one book, couldn't have been left out in favor of tying up more important plots that we were missing, or in favor of just focusing on the characters that we had, instead of introducing a bunch of new characters that we didn't really need to know. It's just very frustrating to see a whole new cast come in and a whole new set of rules and a whole new version of the world, and then half of it is just thrown away and meant nothing in the end. I felt like I wasted my time reading this book, honestly, and that really hurt because I had such high expectations from the debut, and I was just really, really disappointed. The last book I read this month, which I actually finished in pretty much one day, was Words in Deep Blue by Kath Crowley. So this is a book about a girl and a boy who are best friends and kind of secretly in love, and it's about a bookstore where the boy works, and there's a letter library where people write notes and books to strangers or to friends, and they leave them there, and other people find them. So we have these 2 points of view, plus we get to see letters from the letter library. I thought that was really interesting. I loved seeing the letters from the letter library, even when they weren't necessarily connected to the main story, though often they were. I thought that was a really neat way to tell a story like this. I thought that was such a cute idea, and I wish that there was a real letter library where I lived. And I really liked the development of the relationship between the 2 main protagonists, as well as sort of the family relationship that's going on between the protagonists and their families, which are both present, which is a nice change for a young adult romance. So that was fun. I did really enjoy the look at grief and loss and sort of how humans move on after losing people they love and things and places they love, not just people. Like, there's so much discussion about loss and the different kinds of loss and how it impacts people in this relatively short book. I was really impressed by that. Honestly, the only reason that this isn't 5 stars is I really didn't like the sort of othering of popular girls and popular people. The main popular girls are just made out to be monsters. They have no real motivation that's looked into. They're just vicious all the time. Even to the people they supposedly like, they're just nasty, and there's no reason for it a lot of the time. Some of them are even... It's weird. They'll just watch crimes be committed and be like, that's not my problem. I don't care about that. I'm a pretty popular girl, and pretty popular girls don't have feelings. And I don't like that narrative. I don't like the narrative that only people who are alternative are, like, different and, like, actually full, complex people. Everyone is a full, complex person, as hard as it is to believe. And I understand that we were getting 1 or 2 characters' points of view here who were maybe not so charitable about pretty popular people, but yeah, they're just really, really demonized, and to have the antagonists of your story be so one-note and uncomplex, other than, like, they only care about themselves and making other people feel bad, just stop this book from being a full 5-star read. Those are all the books that I read in September, so we're moving into October. I still have a lot of my fall TBR to get through, and a lot of them are pretty fat books, so I'm a little nervous, but I'm going to do my best to read some of them in October. I think I'm going to be starting Empire of the Vampire next, and that is an absolute beast, but I hope I can tear through it. I hope that I can do as well in October as I did in September, even though I've started to explore some of my other hobbies like drawing again, and just enjoying those sorts of things. I'm still going to do my best to read what I want myself to read. I hope that you all enjoyed this video, that you're having a lovely day, and that you have a wonderful weekend.